That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The High Note, which will be available on digital and demand, courtesy of Focus Features, May 29th, 2020, for what is the world premiere of the latest film directed by Nisha Ganatra, starring Tracee, Ellis, Ross, and Dakota Johnson.
Are you familiar with this director's other films?
Yes. This is her fourth feature. Her third feature was kind of her breakout late night film in 2019 that was written by Mindy Kaling, who also starred in Emma Thompson. That was a big deal movie at Sundance that year, and then I think was kind of a big flop for Amazon.
Okay. Describe the plot of this film. So it's about... Oh, well, you do it.
No,
you do it, Norbit.
You're better at synopsizing.
Okay, it's about a young woman named Maggie, who's played by Dakota Johnson. She moves to Los Angeles to become like a music producer.
No.
No?
She didn't decide she wanted to be a music producer until after she starts working for...
Oh.
Yeah, she says that.
Oh, well, correct me, because I'm wrong.
Whatever, I'm listening.
Whatever. So Maggie is living in LA. She becomes the personal assistant to Grace Davis, played by Tracee Ellis Ross. Grace Davis is like a well-known aging pop star. And she has been PAing for her for like 3 years when she finally decides that she wants to ask her if she can produce some of her music. So that's happening. Additionally, we see her meeting a young man named David?
Yes.
Who's played by Kelvin Harrison Jr.
Yes.
She meets this like young man at a grocery store. He's performing at the grocery store. She says, I love your music. I want to produce you. So there's that situation going on. She does get the chance to produce some of Grace Davis's music, which kind of strengthens their bond. Like they become a little more friendly. But things culminate with, so Grace Davis's sort of plot is she is preparing for the release of her live greatest hits album, and Ariana Grande is supposed to open for her, but Ariana backs out at the last minute. So Maggie tells Grace, her employer, I can find you
A replacement.
She is not able to.
Well, she
does, but ultimately she fails. She gets fired. So she ends up retreating to Catalina Island where her father lives. He's a radio DJ. And then things kind of get resolved on the island.
Yes. She was using the Grande opportunity to...
Well, here, so because there's a lot going on.
Yes.
So what do you want to talk about first?
About how this film has no idea why the cage bird sings.
Oh, God. I never make notes, and I actually have notes for this film because it bothered me. Where to begin?
We should begin. You haven't seen Late Night. It's very This film is very formulaic. It's the first time screenplay by a white woman named Flora Greeson. And it's very it feels very familiar, especially if you've seen Late Night. Working Girl came up for me repeatedly. Also the fact that Dakota Johnson is the daughter of Melanie Griffith.
Well, let me run down my list, and then you can add to it. So first of all, I wrote down this movie is all over the place because there are 3 storylines. It's Maggie in LA wanting to pursue her dreams. There's Grace Davis, this aging pop star who seems like she's happy in her career, but then, and there really is no trajectory for her career. We meet her being this sort of like successful pop star who's just singing her same old songs, and she ends kind of like not having done anything differently. And then you have David, the Kelvin Harrison character, who also is going on about his business. He has a very nice life, which when we explain why is, I think, really corny. But yeah, and then Maggie comes along and kind of like disrupts his action. So it's just kind of like, I don't know who this movie's supposed to be about. It feels to me like the original script was focused on Maggie pursuing her dreams, and then maybe they cast Tracee Ellis Ross and decided they had to switch things up to take advantage of her because it's just a mess.
Except that they don't.
But they don't. Okay. the next issue I have is the music. So David's music sounds fine. It sounds very generic and contemporary, but it's fine. I don't know if Kelvin is singing the songs himself.
I don't know either.
But sounds fine. It's fine. Tracee Ellis Ross's music is difficult to pinpoint, like in what era this character was popping, because it sounds like, I don't know what era I think it is. First of all, I don't think the one song that's like her big hit is like
Bad Girl or whatever.
Yeah, it's not a good song, but also it sounds like I just can't tell when it's.
Well, because considering the age she is, she would have been popping in the late 80s, early 90s. So I thought they were trying to make allusions to maybe a Janet Jackson-ish figure.
Maybe.
But it doesn't sound like
the quality of the music is just kind of like.
It doesn't sound like pop, it doesn't sound like hip hop, it doesn't sound like anything that was.
It's kind of disco-y, but then her character's not old enough to have made disco music. Yeah. Okay. Next I have, so Ice Cube is in the film playing Jack, who is
her manager.
Grace's manager. And he's kind of like a pseudo-villain, but it's ineffective because I was comparing it to The Bodyguard. And Whitney Houston's character Rachel, her business manager, that British guy whose name escapes me, he's a similar type character, like just sort of money, like concerned about the business and the money. But in that film, the business manager puts Rachel in danger, right? Because he's prioritizing business. In this film, Jack is prioritizing business and is very open about it to Maggie, to Grace, but it's not at a detriment to either of them.
No.
Right? It keeps food on everyone's table and money in the bank.
He's very pragmatic. The tone that the film, it seems, wishes to take about it is that, he's...
But it doesn't really make sense. So that bothered me a lot. Another issue that I had is it just seems like Maggie is like this white savior because Grace is this woman of color who is a big star, has been very successful in her career. This character is not complaining about wanting to make changes, but then here comes a little white girl telling her like, this can be better, I can do this for you. Then Kelvin Harris's character, David, when she meets him, he's in a grocery store singing, and she, through the story, we understand that she assumed that he had like humble, he was kind of a meager guy, but he invites her to a party, and she realizes he has this fabulous home in the hills. So he has money. She's confused by it, but her character's so arrogant, she's just like, well, I can do your music better than what you're doing. But his character, just like Grace, is not concerned with that. He's like, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I like performing in the grocery stores. It's low pressure. So I just really didn't like this character's motivation of just like, I'm gonna, like, you don't know what you're doing, even though both of you seem to be winning, like, I'm gonna swoop in and...
Right. I think that's maybe a problem with how the screenplay should have evolved after casting, because if both those characters were white, it doesn't seem so egregious. But Dakota Johnson, there's a point, and I wrote it down, it's an hour and 5 minutes in, when Tracee Ellis Ross finally says something logical and puts her assistant in her place and said, I'm a black woman of a certain age, nobody in that room, including you, knows how I feel. So
this is an important scene because Grace goes to like goes to a meeting with the record executives, and it's just kind of like it's just like, oh, show your face, same old. They're excited for the release of her live greatest hits album, and she mentions wanting to make new music. And it's obvious that they're like, no, girl, like, no one's here for it. No one's trying to spend money on that. Just do what makes money. So she goes to the bathroom. She's obviously upset about it. And then Maggie walks in and tries to tell her, like, you need to stick up for yourself and you need to be true to yourself. And Grace goes into her and says, like, there are only 5 women over 40 who have had #1. I don't know if she meant albums or songs. I can't recall. And only one of them has been black. So you don't know what I'm going through. Okay, that moment, an hour, 5 minutes in, to me, that's what this film, like the storyline for Grace should have been. Like, where's her place? Just for aging women in entertainment, like where's their place? This film only broaches it once. Right. Which was a highlight, but then it just goes right away.
And then also how she's using Kelvin Harrison's character. They have a tiff, and he tells her that she's arrogant. But what we really needed was more of a through line addressing Dakota Johnson's whiteness.
Yeah.
I think in this and what it means for her to use black artists to build herself up, even because in the end this is a very pat resolution about how there aren't a lot of female music producers, and that is an important story to tell, but there are intersections here that seem blatantly ignored, which is even more disappointing coming from Nisha Ganatra, who's from Canadian. She's a lesbian, also a woman of color, and it's the Tracee Ellis Ross moment that really pops. It almost seems like that probably came from Ross saying something. But
well, let's keep going. I also have down that the tone of the film is odd to me because it's not particularly funny.
No,
it's not dramatic. There are no real arcs. Like there's no, because like Maggie and David aren't like they don't have a romance. There are no highs. Like there aren't any great highs or lows.
No.
The sort of
very predictable.
The big plot twist is the reason that David is living so comfortably and not really worried about his music is because his mom is Grace Davis.
Yes, which we learn very late in the film, we
can talk about more in a minute, but the whole point is like the tone's off. It's not really like, I guess it's a dramedy, it's not a musical, like it's not even a parody.
Well, and I think we can go back to the casting.
It's very Lifetime.
Of Tracee Ellis Ross as well as this very warm, likable person here that's supposed to be kind of a bitch.
Well, that's my next point. Okay. So what you're saying? No. So to me, this character is kind of like if you mix Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada with like Dolly Parton. Mm-hmm. Except that when Grace Davis is upset, it's not like she's really that cutting or venomous. She's just like, you brought me a smoothie, I didn't want a smoothie.
Yeah,
like it just
difficult and pouty.
But then she's also generous and kind in some moments. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make sense. Like, where is this woman supposed to lie in sort of the realm of Maggie? Like, how important is she to Maggie? It just seems like a fluffy ass. I feel like Grace needed to either be very peripheral, like it's just the idea that Maggie works for this superstar, mm-hmm. or she needed to be integral in Maggie sort of finding her way. But as it is, it's just Tracee Ellis Ross, who is the best part of the film, and I really do like her. But, we really don't know her as an actor beyond the sitcom she's been on, and then obviously Blackish, like a very lovable, fun, mm-hmm. light character. And this film doesn't really even utilize her to that full extent. No,
and I think it's a disappointment in the fact that, both the leads actually have come out from under the shadows of their famous mothers.
Well, I want to talk about that last.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So then well, what else do you have?
Well, I think the structure is very similar to Working Girl, including the bomb drop about Kelvin Harrison Jr. Because in Working Girl, starring Dakota's mother, Melanie Griffith, and her boss, Sigourney Weaver, the man that they share has slept with both of them, Harrison Ford's character, which is kind of a secret teased out in that film as well. So I don't know.
You keep making references to Working Girl, though, and I don't understand why.
Because it's this woman working for a boss and kind of skipping some steps to get ahead, basically.
Okay.
And that movie is more cutting about how women are in the workplace aren't helping each other out, they're more at odds. And this is kind of the inverse of it. But the Melanie Griffith connection.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Going back to the whiteness of it all, mm-hmm. it does bother me that it feels like Maggie doesn't respect Grace.
She almost seems autistic to me in how she doesn't read a room and often says things like, well, you asked me your opinion, but obviously doesn't know how to. There's
a scene where Jack gets Grace a meeting with a very popular music producer who's played by Diplo. Mm-hmm. And they're just talking that shit, trying to get her to make, some like contemporary EDM version of one of her old hits they think will be a hit, right? And she's kind of into it, but then Maggie steps in and basically tells this big shot music producer, you don't know what you're talking about, you shouldn't do this. Just the arrogance of everything she does. Everything she says is like, that's not good, you should do this, I did this, I took it upon myself to do that. That really bothered me. And like you said, maybe if the pop star she worked for was white, and maybe if the guy she met in the grocery store was white, it wouldn't bother me as much. I know it wouldn't bother me. But the fact that they're people of color, and this old basic ass white girl who also that character doesn't demonstrate like her musical prowess. Well, she does sing a couple of times, but she doesn't. All she says like, "Oh, the mixing is weird," or "Oh, like pump up the bass." Like she doesn't show that she's like a musical genius or like a, you know, she's no Quincy Jones. No. she's not even a P. Diddy. Like,
well, and I think the two other points that I want to make about that is, it occurred to me that is it bothering me because I'm seeing what she's doing, just what a white man normally would do. But it seems like we have to be more elevated than that. It can't be just we're showing women exactly acting as men and we're supposed to think that that's okay. No, that behavior is still problematic no matter who it's coming from.
My final point is I'm sure Tracee Ellis Ross doesn't like to be compared to her mother, but I also think, you know, for Tracee Ellis Ross to take a role as a pop star, like the comparisons are inevitable. And I don't think this film or the portrayal of Grace Davis is like, I don't think it respects or gives honor to this, like what Diana Ross means to pop music. And as a woman of color, to be like the archetype for like a black artist, like crossing over to pop, this film just doesn't seem to honor that enough for my taste. And you know, maybe if Tracee Ellis Ross doesn't care, why should I care? But it just doesn't.
Well, you know, the movie was originally supposed to be a project directed by Wanuri Kahiu, Kenyan director that did Rafiki from Cannes in 2018. And it was originally called Covers, which now that I say that out loud reminds me of that Ice-T song Colors for that film.
Well, the one line that really resonated with me is during that meeting where Grace sort of goes off on Maggie and she says there are only 5 women over 40 who have these hits. And I just think like, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not sure if the film, I'm not sure exactly who they're referring to. And she says only one person of color. I don't know if she was talking about Janet Jackson, Tina Turner, her mother, Diana Ross. But either way, it's like, I just wanted this film to really dive into that.
Yeah.
Because it's not a comedy, so it's like, well, why don't you get real and really talk about like the real things? But even if it's not that, even if it was meant to be about Maggie's journey to pursue her dreams, it doesn't really do a great job of because she just so easily like achieves all her goals.
Right. And I think the other point I wanted to make was that we had discussed if she had seemed like she was hustling more than she is.
Yeah.
Because she has this very nice apartment she lives in with a cardiologist played by who we assume is in residency, played by Zoe Chao, and her dad is played by Bill Pullman, and her mom was a singer that died when she was 6, and she just lives in this very posh, very lovely Los Angeles apartment. You're not really struggling. You wasted 3 years of your life working as a personal assistant for this megastar, but she seemed so privileged. Like if we could have seen some of the cracks, maybe that she was really
sure.
Like everything's about to go off the track at any minute for her, and you feel something. And then going back to Working Girl, because that's what you feel for that character, Melanie Griffith.
I thought we have to say Sigourney Weaver because of Working Girl.
Well, because I already did. But and I don't know, Tracee Ellis Ross. I think I had high expectations for this movie. I was like, maybe she can have her mahogany, maybe. And it doesn't do that. So I guess if you're coming into this with any kind of expectations. However, the one thing I am thankful to this movie for was I had no idea who P.P. Arnold was. And when Dakota Johnson goes back to her father's with her tail between her legs on Catalina Island, she DJs
that
him,
one song.
And she DJs. She puts together 3 covers of The First Cut is the Deepest, and I didn't know there was a Cat Stevens song, but it was first recorded by this woman named P.P. Arnold, who was a backup singer for a lot of major stars, including Ike and Tina Turner, and has some of her own albums, and she's done all these. She has a great catalog. That's what I was listening to earlier today, and she was on the 7 Psychopaths soundtrack with this song too, but I guess I was oblivious to it. But I don't know, I'm very I had a very enjoyable run listening to P.P. Arnold today.
Great, well, getting back to the high note, I would recommend this film only because I like Tracee Ellis Ross, and it is a joy to see her.
Sure.
So it is worth sitting through for her. But I would only give this film 2 out of 5 stars.
I agree. And then for being so formulaic and being an hour and 52 minutes still,
All right. Anything
and then
else?
June Diane Raphael, we didn't even get to bring up. Like,
that's right. She plays Grace Davis's like house manager, but really she's just like living in the pool house, like in bikinis, drinking
and doing her thing, and she's funny.
And she's the only line that I laughed at. You laughed twice. I only laughed once, but both those times were from June.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely got their money's worth with her.
And Eddie Izzard, of course, has one scene.
That's right, which is
almost a throwaway, like one scene. But yeah, I'd agree 2 out of 5.
All right, bye.
Bye.